talk to us about. Said to you before we started this interview that you have a pretty amazing Instagram, pretty epic, pretty jaw dropping. How did you get? One question I asked myself is, how did you get these pictures of yourself with these epic vistas without hiking with anyone?
Oh, geez, it sounds silly, but most of the time it was just a self-timer. It really was, and just using a smartphone. Luckily, there are maps that you can have on your phone, so you don't need to carry the bulky paper maps. So the cell phone becomes a necessary device out there, and it just happens to be a beautiful camera as well, so multi-use. Yeah, I was just using the self-timer. I was trying to think, how can I showcase how beautiful this landscape is? Because in the back of my head, I know two things. One, most people aren't going to get to see these places in real life. And two, more powerful, I may never visit those places ever again. So I wanted to take a little bit of the memories with me. Some of them are just for me, and some of them I wanted to share out. I started to have an advocacy mindset where I began to say, if I post beautiful pictures of the natural world, other people might say to themselves, wow, that's stunning. I want to see places like that protected. I don't want to see places like that developed. We have enough suburbia in this country, but we don't really have enough places like the Pacific Crest Trail. In fact, it's probably the only sliver in the country that's that beautiful consistently the whole way from border to border. So I was happy to share little snippets of the journey through the @Tyler Hikes and my blog. It was calculated, though. Anytime I saw something that I felt worthwhile, that was worthwhile to share, I set up those shots. And sometimes I spent minutes thinking, okay, the sun's going to come out from behind that cloud pretty soon. Where do I need to stand? Or what background do I want to use to capture this great moment in my life?
You didn't have a tripod. You just laid the phone up against a
rocks.
Rock or something. Rocks.
Yeah, rocks.
Rocks are your best friend.
Yeah.
So again, it's @Tyler Hikes on Instagram.
Yep.
And then your blog. So I'll put it down in the description of a YouTube video. But your blog can be found where?
It's www.tylerhikes, one word, .blogspot.com.
And so did you wrote blog entries as you were on the trail?
Yeah, when you go into town to both recharge your phone and your own personal batteries, you would connect to Wi-Fi. There isn't much, thank goodness, service out on the Pacific Crest Trail. So when you hit a town and you're relaxing, eating some town food, catching up with friends, family, that's when I would blog. And I didn't do it all the time, but I did end up writing about 20 to 25 posts on this year-long journey, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. It's something that I've always done, Ian, because I'm an avid journaler. For 13 years, I've written down what I've done every single day of my life.
Really?
So I started when I was 17 years old, and I'm 30 now, and I haven't ever missed a day. Cool. I always want to make every day a calendar day.
Still to this day, you're still journaling.
In the squares of a calendar, it's really easy. Buy a calendar. You could highlight the best moments of your life every day in the squares of a calendar. Shorthand. You don't write full sentences. That takes too long. That gets too burdensome. But who doesn't have 60 seconds to jot down in the tiny square of a calendar what you just did that day? And so when I was 17, I asked for one thing for my birthday. I asked for a calendar. And that's all I ever ask for every single year. That's all I get. That's my Christmas present. Just a calendar. That's all I need. And it really did get me in the mindset of, and you might appreciate this as a plant-based nutritionist and outdoorsman, you if you start keeping track of what you do daily, it starts to motivate you to make every day spectacular. It's the only day you're going to have. Today is the greatest day, as my friend Jade always says. And I wanted to make that a habit where I made every day the greatest day. It's probably part of the reason why I also ended up doing this calendar year of thru hiking. That the pun is intended. I wanted to go on a year-long quest where every square in my calendar was jam-packed with interesting stories. I thought, why make today powerful when I can have the most transformative year of my life? And that's why I developed the idea of doing the 3 thru hikes in 1 year.
So give us an example of a calendar square on a Tyler Socash calendar.
Yeah, well, yesterday, for example,
Sure.
what's in there yesterday is I just happened to be going to a wedding. So the groomsmen and I all had breakfast together, and then we got to, of course, do the all the pictures with the bridesmaids, and everyone's name makes the calendar, the place makes the calendar, going to the Inn on Broadway for the big reception at the end of the night makes the calendar, and then getting pizza with my friends Sarah, Chris, Pat, and Jen at the end of the night, that all goes in there, and that's it. So
it's just
condensed.
Keywords,
not full sentences, and it takes 60 seconds before you fall asleep to think back, what did I accomplish today? And the thing that really got me interested in this, because I studied neuroscience in college, was you actually only remember about 60% of yesterday. Think about how much of yesterday you can remember. And then let me challenge you with this. What did you do 1 week ago today? Unless it was a humongous life event or a birthday or a holiday, I doubt you'll remember more than 10% of that day. Probably way less than that. That's generous. What if I ask you this? What did you do 1 day ago, or 1 month ago from right now? What did you do a year ago?
You would know.
I have 13 years where I could tell you what I did every single day of my life.
Interesting.
And what I'll do is I'll typically look back to 10 years ago and reach out to those people and let them know what we did on that day 10 years ago.
That's really neat. That's really neat.
Yeah.
And so just even with keywords, I'm sure if a year from now you look back on yesterday, you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Just with keywords.
This will make the calendar, Ian. Being on this video cast with you.
Very
will
cool.
Absolutely be on my calendar.
You brought up something, you said something that made me think about, I thought about this channel is plant-based, and, I honestly, this story is way bigger than the whole plant-based, lifestyle, whatever. But tell us what you ate on the trail, and also what did you do about fresh water?
Well, let's go with water first.
Yeah.
On the Pacific Crest Trail, it's an intelligently designed trail where it goes by natural springs and running water sources. Now, of course, in the desert, the sources do dry up, but you'd be surprised to learn that there are still springs that run in the desert even into the late summer. They might not be as reliable, but they're there. So I brought one thing with me. I brought a Sawyer water purification filter, which I just screwed on top of a water bottle, filled up my water bottle with lake, stream, or spring water, twisted the Sawyer filter on top, and I could drink right through the microfilter. No giardia at all.
And you never had any
problems.
Got sick. Great.
Never got sick. Some people do, but it's usually because they don't sanitize their hands before they eat. So that's where people get sick typically. It's more of a fecal coliform issue by your own doing, not from a contaminated water source. So yeah, you just have to be careful. But water across the Pacific Crest Trail was never too hard, although this is a fun fact. The longest natural waterless stretch was 101.1 miles, where from the end of the journey at Campo, California, that last 101.1 miles had no natural running water sources, but you do walk near enough to towns with spigots, and some people, trail angels, leave caches of water bottles at roadside junctions under a bridge, and there'll be a sign that says PCT hiker water. And you just take what you need, be respectful for everyone who's coming behind you, of course. But yeah, there was a 101.1 mile stretch without natural water.
And how much water did you carry on you at any one time?
On the PCT, I had 4-liter capacity.
So give us an idea. I'm trying to think of an Nalgene is 32 ounces.
Yeah, which is a liter.
That's so you
1
carried
liter.
4 of those.
One in a Camelback, which had 3-liter capacity, and then
Okay.
a 1-liter water bottle on the side of my pack.
Okay.
Some people just carry 2 liters and they make it work. It just depends on how much you sweat and how much water will be available to you in that stretch.
Did you ever have any, in all 3 stages, we'll get to the New Zealand and Appalachian Trail, but in all 3 stages, did you ever have an oh crap moment where you were almost out and super dehydrated?
In Washington, I was surprised in the Henry M. Jackson Wilderness that there was a pretty big waterless stretch. And actually, at the time, pretty big was 12 miles because I didn't have my trail legs yet. In the desert, if it's a 30-mile waterless stretch, well, you're a machine by the end of a through hike. You can do just about anything. You're invincible. 30 miles doesn't seem like a big deal. But in Washington State, I remember a 12-mile stretch where I felt particularly parched. And another one in the Warm Springs Indian Reservation region in Oregon, really dry. You just have to camel up, as they say, and drink a lot of water at the source you're currently standing at before embarking on the next stretch. I remember also Thielsen Creek to Crater Lake National Park was about a 25 to 30 mile stretch without natural water sources in between. So at Thielsen Creek, you drink as much as you can handle and then move on with full liter capacity filled at that point.
So tell us about what you ate.
Yeah, the food, you're not going to be happy with me, Ian.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Every morning I had the same thing, oatmeal. And typically cold, just cold oatmeal. Now, there were a few times where in Washington, the salmon berries were ripe and the huckleberries were ripe and the blackberries and blueberries were ripe. My friend Wildfire and I collected heaps, threw it all in a huge bowl, and had the greatest oatmeal of our lives. Yeah, it was awesome. And hikers will eat berries along the trail all the time. When they're in season, it's a luxury. In fact, it slows you down. You're eating so many berries. It's wonderful, the wild fruit. You show up at a grocery store, and what you're thinking as a thru hiker who just quit their job is, I can't spend that much money, and I need enough calories to get me to the next town or resupply point.
Calorie dense.
Yeah. Some people are really good about it. They'll mail drop dehydrated meals that they've created. When I have to pack for a vacation, I do it last minute. I am not good at preparation with food for long distance hikes. Mm-hmm. So I just said, I'm going to show up at every gas station or grocery store I walk by and just buy what's cheap and what I want, what I'm craving. Right. So no joke, lunch, are you kidding me? Nutella, M&Ms, wraps. If I'm lucky, a little bit of cheese. But then we're getting right back into things like Wheat Thins, Chips Ahoy cookies. Mm-hmm. I know your heart's pounding. This is terrible to hear. Yeah. Nutella was my treat of choice. Yep. Nutella. Are you kidding me? 2,000 calories in one little jar. And it's what my body wanted. Yep. Sometimes beef jerky. Yep. And
did you mention bologna earlier?
I didn't eat bologna. No, okay. I didn't. That is what I would do. That was cheap though. Is ramen. Okay. Lots of ramen. Okay. The dehydrated backpacker meals are too expensive to buy all the time. It's hard to keep vegetables for more than a few days on the trail.
And they're not very calorie dense.
Yeah. Fruit too. Like you want an apple every now and then, but you can only carry them so far, nectarines and peaches. So I really was eating a lot of processed food that wasn't perishable. And did I suffer from that diet? I didn't. My body said, with its metabolism, this is what you can do. When you get to towns, a salad sounds so good. When you get to towns, people will indulge in milkshakes and burgers. That's common. Mm-hmm. You can get good food in towns. I happened to hike with 3 vegans on the Pacific Crest Trail. 3 in my trail family from Mammoth Lakes, California, south all the way to the Mexican border. And they made it work. Sure, when they go into town, they get the cheeseless pizzas and they'll eat some Oreos as snacks every now and then.
So what did they eat on the trail?
Oh, yeah.
What were their staples?
They were really good with making dishes with quinoa and bringing taking the time to bring in the good cheeses, to bring in, of course, no animal products. So fruit, vegetables, they would make it work.
Huh.
And it's never been a part of my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
It was healthy eating. And so I didn't have that understanding. Sometimes they would be purchasing things from the grocery store, and I would say, what is that?
Yeah.
And that's incredible to me as a educated person in this country, that sometimes I'll see things in the grocery store that I just do not understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't speak too much on what my vegan friends were eating, but it seemed like they were eating way healthier than me. And despite what people will say, they had the calories to do the same amount of work as me.
Yep.
And they didn't lose much weight at all. We all stayed relatively healthy the entire way. And so the vegans in my trail family were incredibly nourished. There was no deficiency there at all. Sometimes it's hard when you enter a small town to find vegan options.
Sure.
And I think that's really the part that vegans would struggle with on a thru hike, is knowing that you'll get to a small town and they'll have the options that you need.
Yeah, I hear you. So tell us, maybe this will be a good segue into, tell us about, you spoke about your Pacific Crest Trail, but tell us about now your New Zealand Trail, your stage 2. Kind of how long after the Pacific Crest Trail did you start the New Zealand Trail, and how long did it take you?
Yeah, I didn't quite know when I would finish the Pacific Crest Trail, so I booked a flight in December. So I had a month and a half where I just went home, visited with family for a bit, came back to Rochester, visited with friends for a bit before heading out to Auckland. I ended up flying out on December 15th, and you lose a day of travel when you fly across the world. So I didn't start hiking until December 17th on Te Araroa. I camped right at Cape Reinga, right on Te Warahi Beach. I tell you what, Ian, all of a sudden you wake up and you're on Te Warahi Beach, the very tip of the North Island of New Zealand, and you're looking out where the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean are colliding. And it looks turbulent. There are huge waves out there. It's a very spiritual place for the Māori people. Cape Reinga, the tip of the North Island where the Te Araroa begins, is a very spiritual place, and you can feel the magnitude of that when you're on that beach. I'm walking across Te Warahi, day 1 of Te Araroa. Got 2,000 miles to get to Bluff at the bottom of the South Island. I turn around after doing this 2-mile beach walk, and I am the only human there. And now I'm working my way on the west side of the northern spit of New Zealand land. So now I'm looking out at the Tasman Sea. And this blows my mind. Almost immediately you hop on to Twilight Beach and then 90 Mile Beach, where you're doing 4 days of beach walking, waiting for the tides to retreat so that you're walking on the durable sand instead of the soft sand. It's hard to find fresh water. There are a few spigots and sources. You have to be aware that you don't want to drink any brackish water where the ocean is mixing with the fresh water, because that'll clog your filter. But New Zealand turned out to be way more than I ever could have imagined.
So the trail in New Zealand,
it's totally different.
I was going to say totally different, but also was it a lot less supported? In other words, there were a lot less resources around for you.
Well, something that I'll highlight real quick is Kiwi hospitality. And maybe because the thru hike is in its nascent days, it was only formed in 2011, so it still has that new charm where people are perplexed.
You're saying the trail.
The thru hike is brand new.
Huh.
In the grand scheme of thru hikes, we're talking about one in its infancy. Yeah. Yes, it is complete. No, it's not marked all the way yet. Yes, you can get turned around because it's not marked properly yet. more of an issue than that would be the fact that the trail itself isn't established everywhere. So sometimes you're walking through tussock fields where you're hopeful that you'll see the next orange marker because there's no established footpath. And will there be in 10 years? Probably, as it gets more use. Most definitely.
Yeah.
But right now it still has little use. So I was in the first 1,000 people to finish this trail, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But in terms of support by the communities, it's phenomenal.
Great.
It's top notch. It's almost at Appalachian Trail level with regard to established trail angels. I mean, I felt so welcomed as I walked across the North and South Island. It was amazing in terms of the support by random acts of kindness trail angels along the way. Sure, they're not mainstays yet like they are on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, where families are trail angel institutions where thru hikers expect to meet these wonderful families that have been helping hikers for decades. That doesn't exist yet in New Zealand. Will it? Probably. But the people there are so kind that you already get that kind of treatment, and it feels very honest, genuine, heartfelt. It's wonderful. But the trail itself, and totally different. The Pacific Crest Trail is well graded. In fact, it's graded for horses, so the PCT is never too steep.
Okay.
A horse, you on horseback, can go from Canada to Mexico.
Oh.
So it's well graded. It has beautiful switchbacks. New Zealand is not like that. It is a tramper trail, hikers only, and yikes. You go from the 90-mile beach where you're exposed to the southern hemisphere sun with little ozone protection. I still have marks on my hands that haven't healed from sunburns that I got on that beach. You're totally exposed to the sun all the time. You're exposed to the wind, the rain. Then you enter the Harakino and Ratia forest tracks. These are bushwalks. We're talking jungle-like muddy bushwalks where, no joke, there is easily knee to thigh deep mud ubiquitous throughout these forests. It sounds tough, and it is. You're going through these Nikau trees that are like palm trees, and you feel like you're on an episode of Lost, going through this really dense vegetation. But then you'll pop out and you'll be on a farm paddock. There are more sheep than humans in New Zealand, and you see a lot of livestock, especially in the North Island. You walk through people's farms. They have stiles that you'll climb to hop over their fence that are established. They are marked. You're walking through cows, sheep, goats sometimes. And then pretty quickly you realize, oh my goodness, 15% of this trail is on highway sometimes. The state highway system is part of the Te Araroa Trail. You're walking past cars going, 90 kilometers an hour and fearing for your life with a shoulder this big. Then you're back on the beach. Then you're back in the bush. And later on, you do get into the upper elevation tussock fields and the alpine scree fields and alpine ridges, and it's stunning 360-degree vistas. You're walking through volcanic landscapes in Tongariro, the World Heritage Site, Tongariro National Park. You're walking through where they filmed scenes out of Lord of the Rings. You're even paddling. Some of the Te Araroa Trail is on riverways and across estuaries where you have to wait for low tide. Some people just put their backpack in a dry sack and swim. So it's a buffet of surfaces across Te Araroa, which I did not fully anticipate. Yeah. So it's not like the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, where you're following a well-manicured trail. It's a variety that becomes quite charming. Sure, you're cursing the trail designers for putting you on State Highway 1, but pretty soon you're in the Taurua Ranges and the Poriora Forests and the Parongia Summit in the North Island, and you're seeing Mount Ruapehu, the tallest mountain in the North Island, and you can You can see the South Island from the Taurua Ranges across the Cook Strait. So it does start to feel outdoorsy, but it's a cultural experience as well.
Most people have heard of the Appalachian Trail before, even if they've never hiked it, even if they unless they live under a rock. And the Pacific Crest Trail, I've heard of that, but again, it's a long trail still in the United States. The New Zealand Trail, from what you said and from its location, seems to me obscure. Mm-hmm. There had to have been more choices. There had to have certainly been more choices of trails that have been around longer, that were more well marked. Why did you choose the New Zealand, this trail in New Zealand?
Yeah, I never studied abroad, and I don't travel much. But in 2009, I did visit my sister, who was studying abroad in Christchurch.
Yeah.
So Nikki's in Christchurch, and I thought, when else am I going to know someone in New Zealand? And so I booked a flight, and I figured, I'll have a place to stay. I won't feel lost. They speak English in New Zealand, so I'm not going to have a language barrier issue. I went there in 2009 and had the greatest time of my life. Well, maybe that's because I hadn't traveled much. I've only seen parts of Canada, Montreal and Toronto. That's it. And then I traveled across the United States a bit, but I hadn't been elsewhere. So New Zealand felt comfortable to me. And as someone who was not introduced to world travel, I needed that safety net of having someone who I knew in that country to feel comfortable to make the plunge in going there initially. So when I learned that in the wake of my 2009 trip, in 2011, Te Araora was completed, the long pathway across New Zealand, I thought, gosh, that would be such a neat place to revisit and really experience the whole country. When I quit my job, I wanted to hike for a year. And in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, you're going to suffer a long winter. Well, if you fly to the Southern Hemisphere, you bypass the Northern Hemisphere winter and go right into the Southern Hemisphere summer. Mm-hmm. And in my calendar year concept, I thought, well, I can hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And then when I get into the fall of our seasons, I can then switch hemispheres and get into the late spring of New Zealand and then hike through their summer, at which point it'll be transitioning to spring. I start the Appalachian Trail in April.
Remind us what month and year you started and finished the New Zealand Trail.
Yeah, I finished the Pacific Crest Trail on October 26th.
Okay.
I then had about a month and a half off. On December 17th, I'm walking down from Cape Reinga, and I finish 4 months and 2 days later on April. This is in 2015 when I started. December 17th, 2015.
Okay.
4 months, 2 days later, April 19th, 2016.
Okay.
I'm leaving Bluff and Invercargill at the bottom of the South Island, flying to Christchurch, flying to Auckland, and then flying back to the United States. So it took 4 months and 2 days, just a little bit longer than the Pacific Crest Trail. But unlike my pace of 21.72 miles a day on the PCT, on the TA, I was going about 14 miles a day.
Because of the terrain and it wasn't graded, or what? What was your reason?
It is more arduous, Ian. What happened was I met a phenomenal trail family in New Zealand. In fact, it's a personal story. I'll tell a lot of it. I met a great trail family. I mean, people from Switzerland and Germany and France and New Zealand and across the United States. It's this great global village atmosphere on Te Araora. People from all over the world are going there. It's ever since Lord of the Rings being filmed there, it's become a tourist hotspot. Mm-hmm. I think a significant portion of their GDP is from tourism. And so people are coming from all over to hike there. Now that it's the world's newest thru hike, it's going to get visited more frequently for a much longer extended period of time because of this phenomenal trail that has just been finished there. So I guess I added New Zealand and not another one because I had familiarity with the region, being there in 2009, and I would be able to miss the Northern Hemisphere winter by experiencing a Southern Hemisphere summer. So I'm glad I chose those three.
That's neat. That's neat.